Paris, May 1926. 7 shots on a quiet boulevard, and a pair of round pince-nez shatters on the cobblestone. The man falling was once head ataman of a Ukrainian state that by then no longer existed. What follows is his record, in order: coachman's son, seminarian, statistician, journalist, ataman, exile. Every entry documented. 4 decades earlier, in a coachman's yard in Poltava, that record had not yet begun. His father drove hired carriages for a living. The family kept a strict Orthodox household on a coachman's wage. In 1895, at age 15, he entered the Poltava Theological Seminary, the path his family expected him to walk toward the priesthood. Seminary discipline was rigid: church Slavonic recitation, dawn liturgy, dormitory curfews enforced by monitors. He kept a desk lamp burning past curfew. Under that lamp he read banned socialist pamphlets smuggled in by older students, pages passed hand to hand. By 1897 he had joined a clandestine student circle organizing among fellow seminarians and local workers. Seminary supervisors discovered the circle's papers hidden inside a hollowed hymnal in his cell. In 1898, the seminary board expelled him for revolutionary agitation, 1 year before ordination. His father's household took the expulsion as a disgrace. The priesthood had been the family's one clear plan for him. Poltava's Zemstvo Statistics Bureau was hiring clerks to tabulate the province's harvest returns. At 19, he took the clerk's post anyway, the first entry in a paper trail that would end in a Paris courtroom. The pince-nez he wore for close ledger work at the bureau was the same style he would wear for the rest of his life. Counting another province's harvest was no life sentence. Soon the bureau's tally sheets would give way to a printing press, and his own name to a byline. That Zemstvo ledger job did not last. By 1902, the harvest counter was smuggling essays into a banned Ukrainian journal under 2 borrowed initials. The Imperial Censor's Office read every Ukrainian language page twice before it reached a reader. Initials were a thin shield, and he knew it. By 1906, the initials were gone. A Kyiv masthead printed his full name for the first time: Simon Petlura, editor. No pulpit, no uniform, just a name, set in lead type for the first time. That same year, he co-founded Slovo, a Kyiv social democratic weekly arguing for Ukrainian autonomy inside the empire, not against it. Police raided the print shop twice in 1907. Both times, the presses were back running within the week. Editors went to prison for less. He kept printing. In 1908, he married Olha Bielska in a small Kyiv parish ceremony, the same year his second journal launched. A wedding ring on an inked hand. 2 kinds of commitment, signed the same year. By 1910, the Tsarist authorities shut the Kyiv paper down outright. He moved the operation to Moscow within the year. In Moscow, he edited Ukrainskaya Zhizn, a monthly explaining Ukrainian affairs to a Russian reading audience for the first time. Duma deputies and Kyiv lawyers were now reading a Ukrainian byline for the first time in their lives. When war broke out in 1914, he took a post organizing supply relief for Ukrainian soldiers serving in the Imperial Army. He had never worn a uniform or fired a rifle. His war was ledgers, requisition forms, and railway timetables for supply trains. No rank yet. Only a desk that moved thousands of soldiers' boots to the front line. By 1916, the committee's reach had grown so far he was elected to its all-Russian Central Bureau in Moscow. By early 1917, his name led Ukraine's top social democratic paper. Far off in Petrograd, a crowd was about to topple an empire. That masthead in Petrograd never got its crowd. By March 1917, the empire the paper served was already gone. A newspaper editor with no rank and no uniform is about to be handed command of soldiers with rifles. Delegates from a dozen Ukrainian-speaking regiments crowd into a Kyiv hall to form the Ukrainian General Military Committee. They vote by show of hands. The editor from the War Relief Committee is elected to lead it. He has organized supply columns and printing runs. He has never given an order a soldier was required to obey. His task: Ukrainize the Imperial Army from within, pull Ukrainian soldiers out of Russian regiments into units answering to Kiev. Telegrams arrive from garrisons in Poltava, Chernihiv, Zhytomyr, officers asking whose orders now outrank whose. Kiev answers to 3 governments now, and none of them agree. Petrograd claims the whole army. The Rada claims only its Ukrainian soldiers. Neither one controls a single barracks. By November, the Rada names him General Secretary for Military Affairs. He now signs orders, not petitions. Chairman Rushevsky signs alongside him a professor's caution paired with a journalist's improvisation, running a ministry neither trained for. On the map behind his desk, colored flags mark which garrisons have sworn loyalty to Kiev this week. Some regiments switch loyalty twice in a single month, flag down, flag up again. In December, the Bolsheviks in Kharkiv declare their own Ukrainian government and call the Rada's army illegitimate. Armed Bolshevik units start moving down the rail lines toward Kiev before the Rada's own regiments are even fully formed. Bolshevik trains are already rolling toward Kiev. The committee man who has never commanded troops must hold the city or lose. Bolshevik rail columns were already closing on Kiev when the Directorate handed him command. In February 1919, he became head ataman of the Ukrainian army. A statistician turned journalist now commanded a war on 3 fronts at once. Bolshevik forces pressed from the northeast, Denikin's whites from the south. The capital itself was already slipping away. By summer, Kiev had changed hands between his forces, the Bolsheviks, and the whites 4 times. The Directorate's government no longer had a fixed capital to govern from. Kamyanets-Podilsky, a small provincial town, became the government's capital of convenience. Reports of the killings reached his own headquarters within days, alongside reports of retreat. French and Polish military missions arrived promising rifles, artillery, credit lines. The promises rarely arrived as shipments. No great power recognized the Directorate as a government in its own right. Typhus and desertion thinned the ranks faster than any single battle. By December, the army that had marched on Kiev was a fraction of its original strength. A war fought for independence had become, in barely a year, a war of retreat. With his army melting away, he turned to the one neighbor still willing to talk terms: Poland. Poland was the only power still willing to talk terms, and by April 1920, terms were on the table. Marshal Pilsudski wanted a buffer state between Poland and the Bolsheviks. The hero wanted an army to retake Kiev. On the 21st of April, the 2 sides signed the Treaty of Warsaw in a closed session, without a public vote of any Ukrainian assembly. The price of the signature was Eastern Galicia, recognized as Polish territory, land his own Western countrymen still called home. In exchange, Pilsudski promised guns, rail cars, and a joint march east to drive the Bolsheviks out of the Ukrainian capital. Word of the concession reached Galician officers within days, and it did not travel well. Some called the treaty necessary, others called it Galicia sold for a war that was already half lost. By early May, combined Polish and Ukrainian columns crossed the old front line and pushed east faster than the Bolsheviks could dig in. On the 7th of May, Kiev fell to the offensive, and for the first time in over a year, the hero's flag flew over his own capital again. In a rear headquarters, aides pinned unit flags back onto the wall map, marking a front line further east than it had stood in a year. The capital his flag now flew over. It would last only 3 weeks. In early June, a Soviet counteroffensive under Yegorov broke through the thinly held Polish flank north of the city. By the middle of June, Kiev was Bolshevik again. Through the summer, the Joint Army fell back west across the same ground it had just crossed, this time under pressure, not by choice. In Warsaw that October, Pilsudski's government signed its own armistice with Moscow at Riga, without a Ukrainian delegate in the room. The campaign the treaty had promised was over. Poland kept Galicia and made its peace. The war for Kiev was simply dropped. Galician officers called the treaty a betrayal, splitting the movement into factions it never rejoined. Behind his retreating line, correspondents are already filing reports of pogroms under his army's flag. The retreating army's flags were already in foreign newspapers by then, and not for the reason he wanted. Through 1919, Jewish towns behind his shifting front were burned and their residents killed by armed men wearing his army's insignia. By the war's end, relief workers had logged the dead in the thousands across hundreds of separate towns. Relief workers and rabbis sent depositions naming specific regiments, specific commanders, specific dates. He answered with orders. In writing, he condemned the killings and threatened courts-martial for any officer found responsible. Copies of that order were printed and distributed to field commanders across the front within the week. Almost none of the accused officers were ever court-martialed. Contemporary Jewish relief organizations in Kyiv and abroad published their own tallies, and the gap between the two records was stark. His defenders point to a chain of command fraying under retreat, undisciplined militias, and rival warlords his government never fully controlled. His critics answer that a commander who signs the orders owns what happens under his flag, enforced or not. The tribunal ledger stayed thin. The relief organization's ledger stayed thick. Neither side ever matched the other's count. By November 1920, the war itself had already answered the question of who would hold Ukraine. Under the terms of Poland's Riga peace with Moscow, his remaining army was disarmed and interned in Polish camps. The map that once tracked his unit's advances was folded for the last time and left behind in the railway car. He crossed into exile that same month, a president in name of a republic that now controlled no ground at all. The years that followed traced a émigré's route: Warsaw, then Budapest, then Vienna, each city a temporary desk and a diminishing title. By 1924, he had settled in Paris, editing an émigré weekly from a rented office above a print shop. Across the same city, in a modest apartment, a watchmaker named Shalom Schwarzbard was quietly asking friends where that exiled president could be found. A watchmaker was already asking where to find him. By May, the answer had reached him. On May 25, 1926, he stopped to browse a bookstall on the Boulevard Saint-Michel. A man he had never met stepped from the crowd behind him and called out his name. Shalom Schwarzbard fired 7 times at close range. The pince-nez he had worn since his seminary days slipped from his face and shattered on the cobblestone. He died within minutes, on the pavement, before a doctor could reach him. Schwarzbard did not run. He stood over the body and waited for the police to arrest him. He told them plainly why. 15 of his own family, he said, had died in pogroms in Ukraine. The trial opened in Paris in October 1927. 17 months later. His lawyers built no defense around the shooting itself. They put the pogroms on trial instead. Survivors of the massacres traveled from Ukraine to testify to what units under his command had done. The jury deliberated for under an hour and acquitted Schwarzbard outright. A century later, street signs across Ukraine still carry his name and still divide the people who read them. The coachman's son from a Poltava yard became a name argued over on monuments he never lived to see. A verdict answered one question: where does a leader's responsibility end for what's done in his name?